I remember the exact moment the evening stopped feeling like a birthday party and started feeling like something else entirely. It was my mother Evelyn's 82nd birthday, and the community hall in Cedar Falls, Iowa, looked the way those places always do. When someone tries very hard to make them cheerful, pink streamers hung a little crooked along the walls. Round tables were covered with thin white paper cloths that had already wrinkled at the corners. A sheet cake waited in the back beside a silver coffee urn that had probably been sitting in that building since the late 90s. A local swing playlist drifted through the speakers, just loud enough to make conversations overlap slightly. People were laughing. Plates were clinking. Someone had brought a tray of cookies no one had touched yet. My sister Denise had organized the entire party. That detail should have meant something to me sooner than it did. She moved through the room with the kind of bright, careful smile she used in church photos. Polite, attentive. The kind of expression that photographs well but never quite reaches the eyes. Her husband Greg stayed near the refreshment table, topping off drinks and carrying plates for people who didn't ask for help. If you didn't know them well, you would have thought they were devoted. The attentive daughter, the helpful son-in-law. The kind of family people compliment quietly at gatherings like this. My son Ryan came up beside me, just as my mother was opening cards from her bridge club friends. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't smile. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him and said quietly, "Get your purse. We're leaving. Act normal." For a moment, I assumed he was being dramatic. Ryan had always been observant. Maybe a little too observant. After his father died 3 years earlier, that instinct had sharpened into something even more watchful. He noticed things other people missed. Sometimes I mistook that for worry. Later, I learnt it was usually accuracy. I kept my expression neutral and picked up my bag from the chair beside me. "What's wrong?" I asked softly. "Not here," he said. There was something in his voice I had only heard a few times in his life. Not panic, exactly. Something colder. Something already decided. I remember passing table 6 on the way out because Mrs. Hanley reached for my hand and told me the frosting roses on the cake were beautiful. I thanked her automatically. I remember hearing my mother laugh at something across the room. I remember Denise lifting her phone to take another photograph, probably documenting what she believed was a perfect evening. The ordinary details stayed with me later. The room looked so harmless. Some people mistake silence for permission. I didn't think those exact words yet, not consciously, but the idea was beginning to form somewhere in the back of my mind as Ryan guided me through the lobby and out into the parking lot. The August air outside had settled into that still Midwestern warmth that lingers even after sunset. Ryan helped me into the car, locked the doors, and only then turned toward me. His hands were shaking. That was the first moment I understood something was seriously wrong. "Mom," he said, "I need you to hear something, and after you hear it, we're not going back in there without calling the police." I stared at him. "The police?" He nodded once and pulled out his phone. He explained quickly that he had gone to Denise's SUV to grab my cardigan. He thought I might get cold later in the evening. When he reached the car, he heard voices nearby and recognized Greg's. Something about the tone made him stop before they noticed him. So he did the one thing his father had taught him years ago. He hit record. Even now I remember the sound quality of that recording. A little wind, shoes on gravel, a car door closing somewhere nearby. Then Denise's voice. "She signed everything this morning, didn't she?" Greg answered, without hesitation. "Power of attorney is done. Monday we move her. Once she's admitted, the house can go on the market." I don't think I breathed for several seconds. Ryan didn't stop the recording. He made me listen to all of it. They spoke about my mother's house as if it were an item in storage. They discussed timing, paperwork, a physician willing to describe her as confused, the process of relocating her to a facility where decisions could be made without her interference. They weren't angry. They weren't even emotional. They sounded organized. That was the part that unsettled me most. When Ryan finally stopped the recording, I heard myself say, "Play it again." He did. The second time was worse. The first time I had still been resisting it, telling myself there must be context I was missing. By the second pass, the structure became clear. This wasn't careless conversation. It was a plan. Paperwork first, medical cover next, transfer after that, procedure. That word settled somewhere heavy in my chest. I could still see the community hall through the windshield. My mother was inside, probably thanking someone for a bouquet or a gift bag. She was smiling, laughing, completely unaware that her own daughter had already begun describing how to remove her from her life. "Did Grandma sign anything today?" Ryan asked quietly. I thought about a conversation from 2 days earlier. Mum had been standing in her kitchen, rinsing blueberries in a metal colander. Sunlight came through the window over the sink. Denise had stopped by that morning, she told me. Brought some paperwork, something about Medicare updates and insurance adjustments. She said it would be easier to handle now instead of later, Mum had said. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now the memory felt different. Ryan watched my face as I put the pieces together. "There's more," he said. I turned slowly. He swallowed. Greg said he had something with him, something to make her confused if they needed a reason for emergency placement. I felt something cold settle deep in my stomach. "He said that?" I asked. Ryan nodded. "Mum, they were planning to drug her." I looked back at the building. Through the windows, the party continued exactly as before. Streamers, cake, people talking. The room looked normal, which, I realized then, was exactly the point. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Denise. "Where did you go?" Mom's asking. Even then I noticed the wording. Not "where are you?" Not "is everything okay?" Mom's asking. A small pressure point designed to pull me back inside. Ryan glanced at the screen. "Don't answer yet." For a moment, we sat there in silence. The engine idled quietly. A moth tapped against the driver's side window. Someone in the lot had left a receipt trapped under a tire, and it fluttered whenever the breeze shifted. Inside the hall, I could hear faint applause, probably for the cake. Then another text arrived. "Car trouble?" Short, casual, fishing for information. Ryan looked at me. "Tell her yes," he said. "Keep it simple." So I typed back. "Battery issue. We'll be back in a minute." I hated sending it. But sometimes a clean lie buys useful time. Through the front windows, I watched Denise read the message and leaned toward Greg. They spoke briefly. A minute later, Greg stepped outside. He walked across the lot with his hands in his pockets, pretending to be someone taking a breath between conversations. He checked the parked cars slowly, then faster. Ryan and I slid lower in our seats as he passed within a few feet of the car. Even through the glass, I could hear his voice. "They're not here." A pause. "No, we stay on schedule." On schedule! That phrase stayed with me. My mother was about to be drugged and removed from her own life, and Greg was discussing it the way someone might talk about picking up dry cleaning. When he finally went back inside, Ryan sat up again. "Mom," he said quietly, "this didn't start today." I looked at him. He shook his head. "I think they've been planning this for months." And suddenly the last year rearranged itself in my mind. Every small comment, every casual question about the house, every visit Denise made with a stack of papers. I felt the anger rising, sharp and immediate. But anger is expensive when the other side has already prepared. So I made the first clear decision of the night. Not reaction, procedure. I handed Ryan my phone. "Call 911, I said. "And tell them exactly what you heard." Ryan made the call while I kept my eyes on the building. The hall glowed through the windshield in that soft yellow light most community centers use after sunset. From the outside, it looked exactly the same as it had 30 minutes earlier. Streamers still hanging, silhouettes still moving past the windows, someone inside still laughing at something harmless. If you didn't know what we had just heard, you would have thought it was an ordinary birthday party. Ryan's voice stayed steady as he spoke to the dispatcher. I could hear the calm, measured tone he'd learned from his father, the one he used when something serious was happening and panic would only make it worse. He gave the address first, then he explained the recording. Then he described the situation inside the building. An elderly woman celebrating her birthday, two relatives discussing sedation and relocation, paperwork already signed. The dispatcher asked careful questions, the kind that separate alarm from evidence. Ryan answered each one. While he spoke, I found myself focusing on small things. A moth kept tapping against the side window. Someone's grocery receipt was caught beneath a tire nearby, fluttering slightly whenever the air shifted. Inside the hall, the faint rhythm of the music drifted through the glass. My mind was looking for something ordinary to hold on to. The first detail that stayed with me, the first curiosity loop that began to form, was a phrase Greg had used in the recording. Monday we move her. Not take her somewhere. Not talk to someone. Move her. The word settled in my mind like a file waiting to be opened. Ryan finished giving our names and muted the phone while the dispatcher stayed on the line. We should start writing things down, he said quietly. Writing what down? Times, who said what. When we left, he pulled a small notebook from the center console and began writing. 9-2 heard conversation, 9-5 recording, played 9-8 called 911. Watching him do that shifted something in me, not emotionally, procedurally. Years earlier, when Ryan was 10, our upstairs bathroom had flooded in the middle of the night. I remember standing in the hallway barefoot while water crept into the carpet. His father had grabbed towels and said calmly, "Nobody gets dramatic until we find the shut-off valve." Ryan had stopped crying instantly. Procedure first, emotion later. Sitting in that parking lot, I realized my son had inherited that instinct completely. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Denise. Car trouble. Ryan glanced at the screen. Answer, he said. Keep it short. So I typed back. Battery issue. We'll be back in a minute. I watched through the front windows as Denise read the message. She smiled politely at someone near the cake table, then leaned toward Greg. They spoke for only a moment. Then Greg headed for the exit. He stepped outside and crossed the parking lot with his hands in his pockets, moving slowly between rows of cars, pretending to look casual. Ryan and I slid down lower in our seats as he passed. He stopped a few feet away and pulled out his phone. They're not out here, he said into it. A pause. No, we stay on schedule. That phrase again. On schedule. It sounded like a business meeting. My mother was about to be drugged and removed from her own life. And Greg was speaking about it the way someone might talk about adjusting a delivery time. When he finally walked back into the building, Ryan sat up again. Mum, he said quietly, this didn't start tonight. I turned toward him. I think they've been building this for months. He was right. And the moment he said it, memories began sliding into place. The first backstory scene returned to me from Easter Sunday. We had been at Denise's house in Cedar Rapids. Ham on the table, foil still folded back, the room smelling faintly of cloves and perfume. Mom sat in a straight dining chair because Denise said the couch was too low for her knees. I had been carrying a tray of deviled eggs from the kitchen when I heard Greg ask casually, "So have you decided what you're doing with the house eventually?" Mom smiled. "I'm doing exactly what I'm doing now," she said. "Living in it." Greg laughed lightly. "Big place for one person." Mum dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "Good thing I know how to use all the rooms." At the time, it sounded like harmless conversation. Now, sitting in the parking lot months later, I could hear the real question underneath it. Asset value, property future, financial lane. The memory was followed almost immediately by a pressure beat. The dispatcher came back on the line. "Ma'am, can you confirm your mother's medical condition?" "No dementia diagnosis," I said. "No recent hospitalizations." "Does she manage her own finances?" "Yes." "Does she drive?" "Short distances during the day." The more I answered, the clearer the situation became. Their story about my mother's decline didn't match her real life, which meant the decline would have to be created. That realization brought back the second backstory scene. 6 weeks earlier, I had stopped by Mom's house after work. The kitchen window was open, and somewhere down the block, someone was mowing their lawn. The smell of fresh grass drifted through the room. Denise sat at the table with a neat stack of forms spread in front of Mom. Yellow sticky notes marked signature lines. Denise looked up brightly. "Perfect timing," she said. "I'm helping Mom simplify some paperwork." Mom tapped one of the pages. "Your sister understands this Medicare language better than I do." I remember setting my purse on the counter. "That's good," I said. Denise added casually, "Some of these forms just make things easier if something ever comes up." Something ever comes up. At the time, the phrase slid past me like dust in sunlight. Now it returned with sharp clarity. The capped pen, the pages already marked. Denise turning each sheet before Mom had finished reading the previous one. One line of dialogue, one smell, one simple physical action, and a strategy hiding in plain sight. I closed my eyes briefly in the car and let the realization settle. Regret is expensive too, but pretending not to feel it wastes time. When I opened my eyes, Ryan had written another line in the notebook. 9:18. Greg searched parking lot. "You think they'll try something tonight?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Because if this is scheduled for Monday, tonight is probably the preparation." He nodded slowly. Just then, the first patrol car turned into the lot. No siren, no flashing lights, just a quiet arrival. Then another behind it. The emotional temperature shifted again. Not relief, exactly. Structure. Authority had entered the scene. An officer in plain clothes approached the car and introduced himself as Detective Nolan Pierce. He listened to the recording once without interrupting. Then he asked Ryan to replay the section about medication. His jaw tightened slightly. "Do they know you heard this?" he asked. "I don't think so," Ryan said. "Good," Pierce replied. Then he asked a question that opened the next layer of the situation. "Did your mother sign a power of attorney document today?" "Yes," I said. He nodded thoughtfully. "That document can authorize financial and medical decisions depending on the language." I felt the weight of that sentence settle. So the paperwork alone could move her. I asked. "Possibly," he said, "especially if supported by medical documentation." Medical documentation, another unanswered detail, another piece of the structure. "If someone wants to create a narrative of incapacity," Pierce continued calmly, "they usually try to make the record match the story." That sentence cooled everything again. Not anger, procedure. He explained that 2 officers would go inside first and observe quietly. Ryan and I would return to the party, stay near my mother, prevent her from consuming anything Denise or Greg provided, and avoid confrontation unless absolutely necessary. "Can you do that?" he asked. I looked through the windshield. Inside the hall, my mother stood near the gift table, laughing with 2 women she had known since I was in elementary school. She looked upright, alert, completely herself. And inside that building, my sister had been describing how to remove her from her life. "Yes," I said, finally. "I can do that." Ryan paused before opening his door. "You should talk to a lawyer tomorrow," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because if Denise filed that paperwork already, she'll try to use it again." He was right. That was the moment the confusion ended for me. The moment family emotion hardened into procedure. I reached for the door handle. Then tomorrow, I said calmly, we start with the paperwork. The walk back into the community hall felt strangely ordinary. That was the first thing I noticed as Ryan and I stepped through the doors again. Nothing about the room had changed on the surface. The music was still playing. People were still talking over paper plates and plastic forks. Someone had started slicing the cake. If anything, the atmosphere had grown warmer. The kind of relaxed, slightly messy feeling parties take on once everyone has settled in. 2 police officers were already inside. You wouldn't have noticed them unless you were looking carefully. They had taken seats near the back wall with cups of coffee in front of them, blending into the room the way people trained for that sort of work often do. Ryan and I moved calmly toward my mother. She was standing beside the gift table with Mrs. Hanley and another woman from her bridge club, holding up a pair of knitted gloves someone had given her. "Oh, good," she said when she saw us. "I thought your car had died." "Battery acted up," I said lightly. Ryan leaned down and hugged her. The moment lasted a little longer than usual. Then he whispered quietly near her ear, just loud enough for me to hear. "Don't eat or drink anything tonight, unless Mom gives it to you." My mother blinked. "Why?" "Just trust me." She looked from him to me. There are moments when parents recognize that a situation has shifted without being told every detail. My mother had raised 2 children and lived through 82 years of ordinary complications. She understood tone, so she simply nodded once. All right. That small exchange mattered more than anyone in the room realized. Sometimes protection begins with something as simple as refusing a cup of tea. Ryan drifted toward the refreshment table while I stayed beside Mom. Denise appeared a minute later. "There you are," she said brightly. I was worried something happened. Her smile was perfect. Her voice was warm. If I hadn't heard the recording 20 minutes earlier, I might have believed it completely. "Battery trouble," I said. "Oh no," she replied, touching my arm briefly. "Greg can take a look after the cake." Her hand was warm, her expression sympathetic. It was almost impressive. But the real problem with performance is that it depends on the audience not knowing the script. I noticed something else then. On the refreshment table, beside the coffee urn, sat a small gift bag I hadn't seen earlier. Green tissue paper, a gold ribbon tied loosely at the handle. The curiosity loop clicked quietly into place. Denise followed my gaze. "Oh," she said, "that's from me and Greg. For Mom?" "Yes." "What is it?" "Just some herbal teas," she said. "Good for relaxing." Relaxing. The word carried a completely different weight now. Ryan noticed the bag at the same moment I did. Our eyes met across the room. He didn't react outwardly, but he moved closer to the table. The officers at the back of the hall were watching too. Not obviously, but I could feel the shift in the air. Moments like that stretch strangely. People continued talking. A man at the next table told a story about his fishing boat. Mrs. Hanley was describing her grandson's graduation. Life continued at full volume, while something else unfolded quietly underneath it. Then Greg returned from the hallway. He walked directly toward the refreshment table and picked up the gift bag. "Time for presents," he said cheerfully. The room responded immediately. "Speech," someone shouted. "Open it now," another voice added. Greg handed the bag to my mother. "This one's from us," he said. My mother accepted it politely. "Well, thank you." The emotional temperature rose slightly. Not panic. Social pressure. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward her as she pulled the tissue paper aside. Inside the bag were 3 boxes of chamomile tea. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. Just tea. Except Ryan stepped forward before she could remove the first box. "Grandma," he said calmly, "can I see that for a second?" Greg's head turned sharply. "Why?" Ryan smiled faintly. "I want to check something." Greg hesitated. It was only half a second, but that half second was enough for the detective to stand up. Detective Pierce moved slowly through the room toward us. Most of the guests assumed he was simply another late arrival. He stopped beside Ryan. "Mind if I take a look at that?" he asked. Greg's posture changed. "Who are you?" Pierce reached into his jacket pocket and showed his badge briefly. "Detective Nolan Pierce." The room went quiet. Not completely, but enough. That's when the room went quiet. Greg forced a laugh. "Detective? This is a birthday party." Pierce nodded. "I'm aware." He took one of the tea boxes and turned it over slowly. The packaging was sealed. The label looked normal. But when he opened the top flap, something small slid out from between the packets, a thin envelope, unlabeled. Ryan and I both saw it at the same moment. Evidence. Greg spoke quickly. "I've never seen that before." Pierce held the envelope up between two fingers. "What's this?" No one answered. The room felt colder suddenly. Mrs. Hanley stepped back. Someone near the cake table whispered, "What's going on?" Pierce slipped the envelope into a clear evidence bag. One of the officers handed him. Then he looked directly at my mother. "Mrs. Carter," he said calmly, "would you mind stepping outside with me for a moment?" My mother raised an eyebrow. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," he said. "I just need to ask a few questions." Denise moved forward immediately. "This is ridiculous," she said. "There's no reason to drag my mother outside." Pierce turned toward her. "When medication and financial authority appear together," he said evenly, "we usually take a closer look." Greg's jaw tightened. "What medication?" he asked. Pierce didn't answer him. Instead, he looked toward Ryan. "Did you bring the recording you mentioned?" Ryan nodded. "I did." Greg's eyes widened. "What recording?" The temperature shifted again, not louder, colder. My mother set the gift bag back on the table. "Well," she said calmly, "this birthday has certainly become memorable." The detective gestured toward the doors. "Let's step outside." Denise grabbed her arm suddenly. "Mum, please don't listen to this nonsense." My mother looked at her for a long moment. Then she gently removed Denise's hand. "I think I will listen," she said. We walked toward the exit together. Behind us, the party had dissolved into quiet whispers. Plates sat half-finished on the tables. The cake knife rested untouched beside the frosting roses. And for the first time all evening, the music stopped. The air outside felt cooler than it had earlier in the evening. Sometimes a change of environment does that, not because the temperature actually drops, but because the situation shifts from social space to something more procedural. The parking lot lights hummed faintly overhead, casting long yellow reflections across the asphalt. Two patrol cars were parked near the entrance now. Their lights were off, but the presence was unmistakable. My mother stepped carefully down the curb beside Detective Pierce, adjusting the light shawl around her shoulders, the way she always did when the evening breeze picked up. She looked more curious than frightened. "All right," she said calmly. "What exactly is happening?" Pierce opened his notebook. "Mrs. Carter, I'm going to ask you a few straightforward questions." "That seems reasonable. Did you sign legal paperwork earlier today?" "Yes." "What were you told the documents were for?" She thought about it for a moment. Denise said they were insurance updates, something about making things easier if I ever needed help managing appointments. Pierce nodded and wrote something down. Evidence action. Then he asked another question. "Did anyone explain a power of attorney clause to you?" "No." My mother answered that one without hesitation. "Were you given time to read the document yourself?" "Yes," she said. Although Denise had marked the pages where I needed to sign, that small detail landed quietly in the notebook. "Another piece of the evidence trail," Pierce continued. "Did a doctor examine you today?" "No." "Recently?" "No." He paused, then asked the question that shifted the financial lane into focus. "Mrs. Carter, do you own your home outright?" "Yes." Do you have a mortgage or loan attached to the property? No. Estimated value? She tilted her head slightly. I suppose around 300,000, perhaps a little more. Pierce glanced briefly toward the building. That's helpful. Inside the hall, we could see movement through the windows. People were gathering near the entrance now, curiosity drawing them closer to the glass. Social lane pressure rising. Ryan stood beside me quietly while the detective continued writing. The scratch of his pen sounded louder in the still parking lot. A moment later, the doors opened and Denise stepped outside. She moved quickly toward us. There's no reason for this, she said. You're embarrassing Mom in front of everyone. Pierce didn't look up immediately. Mrs. Barrett, he said calmly. I'll speak with you shortly. This is a misunderstanding. That's what we're determining. Greg followed her outside a moment later. He stopped when he noticed the patrol cars. His expression shifted just slightly. The performance had begun to crack. What's going on? He asked. Pierce closed the notebook for a moment and studied him. That depends, he said. You tell me. Greg spread his hands. My wife's mother is celebrating her birthday. That's what's going on. Did you provide her with medication tonight? No. Did you place an envelope inside the tea box she was about to open? I already told you, Greg said quickly. I've never seen that envelope. Pressure beat. Pierce didn't argue. He simply looked toward one of the uniformed officers. The officer approached, carrying a small, clear evidence bag. Inside it was the envelope Pierce had removed from the tea box. And another item, a small pill container. Recovered from Mr. Barrett's jacket pocket, the officer said. Evidence action. Greg's face changed immediately. That's not mine. Pierce looked at the container. Then you won't mind if we send it to the lab? Greg said nothing. Denise stepped forward suddenly. This is insane, she said. You're treating us like criminals. Pierce turned toward her. Mrs. Barrett, he said calmly, did you submit a power of attorney document to your mother's bank this afternoon? Denise froze, only for a moment, but long enough. Yes, she said finally. Why? So I could help her manage things. Financial management? Yes. Medical authority included, she hesitated. I think so. Pierce opened his notebook again. Evidence action. The silence that followed was heavy. Behind us, the guests inside the hall had moved closer to the windows. Several people had stepped outside now, forming a loose circle near the entrance. Community observation. Social lane tightening. My mother watched all of this quietly. Finally, she spoke. Denise, she said softly, did you tell the bank I was unable to manage my own affairs? Denise's voice wavered slightly. No. Did you tell them you might need to place me in a care facility? Denise didn't answer. Greg did. The house is too much for you, he said quickly. We were just trying to help. My mother looked at him for a long moment. 82 years of life gives a person a particular kind of stillness when someone else begins explaining their intentions. You were going to drug me, she said. Greg laughed sharply. That's ridiculous. Ryan stepped forward. I have the recording. Greg turned toward him. What recording? The one where you said Monday we move her. The sentence hung in the air. Denise's eyes widened. You recorded us? Ryan nodded. Yes. Greg's voice hardened. You had no right to do that. Detective Pierce spoke before the argument could grow. In Iowa, he said calmly, single-party consent recording is legal. Authority clause. The temperature cooled instantly. Greg's shoulders dropped slightly. Pierce turned toward my mother again. Mrs. Carter, do you feel safe returning home tonight? Yes. Would you like assistance, ensuring no one attempts to relocate you against your will? Yes. All right, he said. We'll document that. Another officer stepped closer and handed Pierce a small report sheet. Evidence action. Pierce wrote for several seconds, then closed the folder. He looked at Greg. "Mr. Barrett," he said, "I'm going to ask you to come with us." "For what?" "Possession of controlled substances and suspicion of conspiracy related to elder financial exploitation." Greg tried to laugh again. "This is insane." Pierce didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded toward the patrol car. "Let's talk about it at the station." Denise grabbed Greg's arm. "Paul!" He didn't look at her. The officer guided him toward the cruiser. The back door opened, closed. That sound, the quiet click of the patrol door, carried farther than the shouting would have. Inside the hall, someone turned off the music. The party had ended without anyone announcing it. Denise stood motionless near the entrance. Guests began drifting toward their cars, whispering quietly as they passed. Social lane dispersing, Ryan exhaled slowly beside me. "Well," he said. "Yeah," I replied. Detective Pierce returned to us after the patrol car pulled away. "This isn't over," he said. "I assumed it wouldn't be," I answered. "We'll need copies of the documents your mother signed. You'll have them. There may also be compliance notifications sent to the bank if that power of attorney was filed." Financial lane tightening. Ryan asked the question that had been forming since the beginning. "Does that freeze anything?" Pierce looked at him thoughtfully. "Possibly," he said. "Banks take this kind of thing seriously." That was the first hint of the resolution mechanism. Account review, transaction flags, institutional scrutiny. The officers finished their notes under the parking lot lights while the last guests slowly left the building. It was nearly midnight by the time the cruisers pulled away. My mother looked back at the hall one more time. 82 years, she said quietly. "I thought I'd seen everything." Ryan smiled faintly. "Apparently not. We drove her home instead of Denise that night. The porch light was still on when we arrived. The flower beds looked exactly the same. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side, the way it always had. Inside the kitchen, my mother poured herself a glass of water and sat down at the table. She looked at both of us carefully. "For the record," she said. "Yes?" I asked. "I'm not going to a nursing home," Ryan grinned. "Noted." The next morning, the institutional tightening began exactly the way Detective Pierce predicted. The bank called. The bank called at 9:12 the next morning. I remember the time because Ryan had started writing everything down the night before, and by then the habit had taken hold of all of us. Small details had begun to matter in ways they hadn't before. My mother was standing at the kitchen counter when the phone rang. The kitchen looked exactly the way it always had. The same pale blue curtains above the sink. The same ceramic bowl she kept filled with apples. Morning sunlight was coming through the window in that soft way it does just after 9. Nothing about the room suggested that a legal problem had just begun unfolding. Mum glanced at the phone screen. "Unknown number," she said. "Answer it," I told her. She did. Ryan and I sat across the table while she listened. Her expression didn't change much while the person on the other end spoke. She didn't look frightened. She didn't even look angry. Mostly she seemed to be concentrating the same way she used to listen to instructions from a pharmacist or a bank teller. After about a minute, she said, "I understand." Then she ended the call. "The bank would like me to come in," she said calmly. Ryan leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "They received a power of attorney authorization filed yesterday afternoon." The words settled heavily into the room. Filed. That detail mattered more than anything else, because it meant the paperwork had already entered the institutional system. Denise hadn't just talked about the document, she had submitted it. And once paperwork enters a system like that, it begins moving through its own procedures. "What did they say exactly?" I asked. "They want to review the document with me in person," Mom replied, "and verify that I understand what it authorizes." Ryan nodded slowly. "That means compliance flagged it." "Probably because of the police report," I said. "Financial lane tightening." An hour later, we were sitting in a glass-walled office inside the Cedar Falls branch of Mid-State Bank. The compliance officer introduced herself as Karen Holt. She was in her early 40s, dressed in a grey blazer, with a thin stack of documents already open on the desk in front of her. The tone she used was careful and professional, the kind people adopt when they are dealing with situations that might become legal later. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "thank you for coming in this morning." Mom smiled politely. "Of course." Karen slid a document across the desk. "This power of attorney authorization was submitted yesterday afternoon by your daughter, Denise Barrett." Mom looked down at the pages. The paperwork already had Denise's name on it. Financial authority across 3 separate accounts, signature lines, witness lines, a notary stamp. Ryan leaned slightly closer to read it. "Is this active?" he asked. Karen folded her hands. "Technically, yes," she said. "However, the police notification we received last night triggered an internal review. Evidence action." She opened a second folder and turned it toward us. "As a precaution, we've temporarily restricted all transfers connected to this document. Account freeze. Pressure beat." My mother exhaled quietly and leaned back in the chair. "Well," she said, "that's reassuring." Karen nodded. "We take elder exploitation very seriously." That sentence cooled the room in a way I didn't expect. Not dramatic, not emotional, just procedural. Authority working quietly. Ryan asked another question. "What happens next?" Karen tapped the folder. "We verify that the principal, your grandmother in this case, understands the document and still wishes it to remain active." Mom looked up immediately. "I don't." Karen nodded once. "In that case, we'll suspend the authorization while the matter is investigated." Financial lane consequence. When we left the bank, Ryan pushed open the glass doors and paused on the sidewalk. "That stops them from touching her money," he said. "For now," I replied. Mom adjusted her purse strap. "But not permanently," she added. She was right. Banks can freeze movement, but they don't decide truth. That process takes longer. The social lane began moving almost immediately. Cedar Falls isn't a large city, and a police presence at a birthday party travels quickly through a neighborhood. By noon, 2 different neighbors had already called. The first was Mrs. Hanley. "I just wanted to make sure Evelyn was all right," she said gently. Mom thanked her and assured her everything was under control. A few hours later, Mr. Cooper from across the street knocked on the door with a small bag of tomatoes from his garden. He didn't mention the party directly. He simply handed the bag to Mom and said, "Let me know if you need anything. Community presence, witness support, social lane." That evening, Detective Pierce called again. Mom put the phone on speaker so we could all hear. "We completed the preliminary review," he said. His voice sounded the same as the night before, calm, measured, almost detached. "Greg Barrett has been charged with possession of controlled substances and conspiracy connected to elder financial exploitation." Ryan looked at me. "That was quick," he whispered. Pierce continued. "The pills recovered from his jacket have been sent to the lab. Initial assessment indicates they were prescription sedatives." "Evidence confirmation?" Mom asked quietly. "And Denise?" There was a brief pause on the line. "She's been released pending further investigation," Pierce said. Pressure beat. Ryan frowned slightly. "So she's out?" "For now," Pierce replied. "But she will be required to surrender financial documentation and cooperate with investigators." Mom thanked him and ended the call. The kitchen felt quiet again after that. The refrigerator hummed softly in the background. Outside, a lawnmower started somewhere down the block. Finally, Mom spoke. "I suppose they thought it would all look official." "What do you mean?" Ryan asked. "All those forms," she said. "The doctor, the paperwork." She folded her hands on the table. Some people believe authority comes from saying something first. She looked at the document copy Karen had given us. But authority doesn't come from saying something first. She paused. It comes from the system agreeing with you. The words stayed with me longer than I expected. The next few weeks moved more slowly. Institutional tightening rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It's meetings, phone calls, letters, quiet confirmations that appear one at a time. The bank finalized the account restrictions. A probate attorney reviewed the document Denise had filed and determined that the witness procedure had serious flaws. Evidence trail resolution. Dr. Holloway's licensing board opened a formal inquiry into his role in the attempted medical declaration. Greg's charges expanded after the lab confirmed the sedatives were strong enough to incapacitate someone my mother's age. And Denise called once. The phone rang late in the evening while we were washing dishes. Mum answered. Hello? There was a long pause on the line. When Denise finally spoke, her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Is Mum all right? Mom looked at me across the kitchen. Yes, she said. Another pause. Then the call ended. Months later, the final outcome arrived the same way the beginning had, through paperwork. Greg accepted a plea agreement connected to financial exploitation and illegal possession of medication. Dr. Holloway lost his license to practice medicine. And Denise's case continued through the courts. Family cases move slowly, but the most important outcome had already happened long before any court date. My mother was still living in her house, still watering the flowers along the back fence, still walking to the mailbox every afternoon. Normal life had returned. One evening, about 6 months later, we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sun settle behind the maple trees. Ryan had just been accepted to law school. Elder law, he said. The whole situation had changed how he thought about systems. Mom smiled at that. I'm glad someone learned something useful from all this. More than one person, I said. She looked out across the yard quietly. Then she said something that made me think back to the parking lot that night. Do you remember what you told me? What? That some people mistake silence for permission. I nodded. She smiled faintly. Well, she said softly, I suppose they finally learned the difference. If stories about quiet boundaries and the systems that protect them resonate with you, you're always welcome to stay.